Claire, we've made a decision. You're no longer director of surgery. That was it. No context. Just the clean cut of a scalpel voice. The phone lit up at 6:42 a.m., its screen humming against the muted snow-filtered light spilling through the high windows. My penthouse, usually a sanctuary of sterile clarity and control, felt like it had just shifted off its foundation. I didn't recognize the number at first. The voicemail was under 20 seconds long. Evelyn's voice had never cracked, not even when she buried her own brother. Why would it now? I replayed it. Then again, and again. Same measured tone, same silence at the end. Just Richard's breath, heavy and unspoken. Like he'd leaned too close to the phone but said nothing, as usual. The coffee I'd brewed sat untouched. I opened my inbox. Nothing. No HR memo. No legal documentation. Not even a courtesy email from the hospital board. I refreshed the page 3 times before clicking into my hospital account portal. Access denied. I stared at the error like it would shift. I refreshed. Again. Denied. So this was how they'd chosen to do it. Not a meeting, not a discussion, a voicemail. I dialed Evelyn, straight to voicemail. I tried Richard's personal line. His secretary answered, polished and distant. He's in meetings all day. I didn't bother leaving a message. My thumbs hovered over the screen, willing someone to call and say it was a misunderstanding. Nothing came. It had taken me 7 years to pull the surgical department out of debt, 2 to automate its residency program, and 1 to open a trauma unit that bore my name. I had rebuilt it. And now, deleted. Like a folder emptied into digital ether. I stood. My bare feet felt the cold of the marble floor. I needed answers, not dignity. The silence became louder. I could feel the weight of every conversation we hadn't had. Every subtle exclusion, every bored dinner where I wasn't invited to sit next to them. It was all recontextualizing in real time. Had this always been their plan? I walked to the study, pressed the fingerprint reader on the drawer below my desk. It clicked open with a clinical sound. I reached for the slim hard drive I hadn't looked at in over a year. Plugged it in. Dropbox greater than stabilization 2020A folder I had created back when the hospital's finances were faltering, when payroll delays were becoming weekly. I had offered a solution then. A silent internal loan of $800,000. No contract, just a gesture. I had believed in the institution, in the legacy, in family. The records were still there. Transfers, wire confirmations, my notarized letter. But I had never seen it acknowledged in the hospital's books. No repayment schedule, not even a thanks. I had buried it then, thinking trust would return dividends. Now I saw what dividends looked like. Silence. A fresh rage surfaced, cold and measured. My fingertips hovered over the keyboard before moving to the locked cabinet again. An old card, pressed between dusty files, caught the light. Amelia Joe, Healthcare Council. We hadn't spoken since I was a fellow. I opened my laptop, drafted a single line. I'm ready to talk. Quietly. And hit send. The badge clicked red. That's weird, the security guard said, not meeting my eyes. System glitch, maybe. I didn't respond, just stared at the scanner as it blinked. Once, twice, then dead. The plastic rectangle had never refused me before. I pressed it again. Red. Let me check the system, he offered, already tapping. His screen lit up, a brief flicker of concern crossing his face before he straightened up like nothing had happened. Might just be syncing issues, he said, eyes trained somewhere above my head. Behind me, the hospital moved like clockwork. Carts squeaking, nurses buzzing between stations, voices clipped and clean. Hartley General, the building that bore my name. My work, my legacy. I stepped back, nodded once, and walked toward the admin entrance instead. There were no signs posted, no warnings, just an absence. The leadership wall near the elevators had always greeted staff and visitors alike. Framed portraits, Chairwoman Evelyn Hartley at center, flanked by key executives. My frame had been second from the left for the past 5 years. Now there was only a rectangular imprint, clean and blank. The glass removed, the plaque gone. I stood there too long. Someone cleared their throat behind me. "Jason, you're early," he said, voice oiled and polished. He wore a suit tailored for headlines and handshakes. No white coat, no calluses, just branding. "I thought we had a board sync this morning," I said, measuring my tone. "Oh, that got shifted. Should have gotten the email," he said with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Anyway, hope you'll stop by the town hall. Big moment." He walked away before I could answer. Town hall, I hadn't been told. By 9:15, the auditorium was half full. Projected slides blinked. Hartley General, future forward. Jason stood on stage like a startup guru, all catchphrases in TED Talk cadence. "Next-gen leadership," he said, "rooted in tradition but ready for transformation." Applause. There was no chair with my name. I stood at the back in the shadows near the AV booth. "Where's Dr. Claire?" someone asked near the front. Jason smiled wide. "She's taking a much-needed sabbatical. We support her fully." A lie, delivered flawlessly. On my way out, I felt a hand brush mine. Kelly, one of the residents I had mentored since her first shaky year. "They said you're on leave," she whispered. "Are you okay?" I gave a small nod, lips pressed tight. She looked like she wanted to say more, but didn't. Down in the basement archive, the air was dry and undisturbed. I found the IT cart still tagged from the last inventory sweep. My old laptop, gray casing, faded sticker on the hinge. I popped the bottom open, removed the hard drive, and slipped it into my coat pocket. They had wiped the public parts of me. But not everything was on their servers. Back in the main hallway, Jason turned a corner and stopped short. We stood in a moment of strange silence. He smirked, voice like a dull scalpel. "Some people just don't evolve." They didn't fight me. They just faded me out. I wasn't fired. I was diluted. The floor of my apartment was a wreck of paper trails and dim light. One desk lamp burned amber over the chaos. Folders torn open, receipts curling at the edges. Post-its from years past still smelling faintly of dry ink and coffee. I sat cross-legged in the center of it, the November cold sliding down the windows in thin silver threads. The hard drive purred faintly in the laptop. Files loading, PDFs populated the screen, blinking into focus. Funding ledgers, email threads, spreadsheets from my old accounts. I scrolled through them slowly, pausing on a scan of my check to the hospital finance department. $800,000, dated May 2020. No acknowledgement. No record in the board minutes. It had disappeared into operations, untraceable, unless you knew where to look. Inbox ping. From drn@medmail.net. Subject, just a note. "You weren't wrong to walk, but you'll need proof. They don't remember, but I do. Ian." I hadn't heard from him since he left last winter. A man who'd poured 3 decades into the hospital, then vanished from leadership with nothing but a shell statement about early retirement. His message sat like a quiet hand on my shoulder. I hit reply. "I'm building something. Stay nearby." I created a new folder. Exit Claire color-coded subfolders by year. 2019, Financial Intervention. 2020, Personal Loan Docs. 2021, Meeting Minutes Anomalies. 2022, Board Votes, Absent Claire. Drag, drop, highlight, sort. The more I pulled, the more the silence made sense. It had been designed. Not a coup, just erosion. My name slowly removed from planning docs. My access filtered down. My emails CC'd less and less. At 2:41 a.m., I stumbled across a voice memo buried in the 2022 files. It was unlabeled. File name a string of random numbers. I played it. Muffled sound. Then Evelyn's voice, clipped and deliberate. Claire's too principled. That makes her dangerous. Jason's laugh followed, dry and close. She won't bend, so she'll break. Silence. I sat frozen, breath caught between anger and something colder. The file had been saved during an internal systems meeting, the kind where we shared drives on screen. I must have left the recorder on, unknowingly capturing the moment they agreed to disassemble me. It wasn't illegal, but it was real. And real could be used. I zipped the dossier, attached the memo, compressed it all and encrypted it, sent it to Amelia. 15 minutes later, her reply came. Received. We'll position this as leverage, not revenge. You still have your shares, Claire. That's not nothing, Amelia said. That's leverage. The wood-paneled room smelled faintly of citrus oil and velvet age wine. Jazz murmured from hidden speakers. The restaurant had no signage outside. Reservation only, unsearchable, the kind of place designed for unrecorded agreements. 2 days after Thanksgiving, and yet the world outside still glowed with excess and denial. Inside, everything was clean, deliberate. Amelia poured tea, not wine. I hadn't asked. My appetite was absent anyway. Across from me, Ethan Caldwell leaned forward, fingers brushing the edge of the folder I had placed between us. The folder contained 4 weeks of extraction. Spreadsheets, memos, meeting recordings, asset shuffling. He didn't flinch. Your 38%, he said finally, voice low, is enough to block any resolution or demand any audit. No right of first refusal? Amelia nodded. Bylaws haven't been updated since 2011. They never assumed a founder's stake could flip. He opened the folder fully, one document at a time, notes scribbled in the margins. Internal R&D funds rerouted to a shell project. Hartley Future Labs, Jason's dream venture, cloaked in ambiguous tech development and experimental therapies with zero clinical oversight. Evelyn's signature appeared beside approval forms, her pen strokes just slightly more slanted than I remembered. You're sure you want this to go through? Ethan asked, now quiet. I'm not burning the building, I said. I'm just showing the exits. He smiled. Not kindly, professionally. Precision is always louder in the long run. Amelia slid the final document across the table. Transfer of shares, buyer silent for now. Public announcement unnecessary unless audit conditions are met. I read every line again. My name, my ownership, my release. The signature line felt both too empty and too full. I signed. Ethan stood and buttoned his coat. We begin Monday. Quiet diligence, then precise escalation. He was gone before dessert arrived. Amelia lingered. You'll get pushback. Not soon, but fast, when it comes. I nodded. Back home, the lights of Boston looked brittle through the frost. I kicked off my heels, unzipped the dress, pulled my hair loose. Laptop open. One new email. No sender. No subject. Just an attachment. A scan of an old yellowed page. A ledger. Handwritten. At the bottom, scrawled in ink I recognized immediately. R.H., my father. They thought I had no allies, but ghosts still had hands. There's a new name on the board. Who? No one knows. That's the problem. The elevators opened on the executive floor and spat rumor into every corridor. Nurses carried trays a little faster, administrators spoke a little softer, and the Hartley crest embossed on the glass doors suddenly looked like a liability instead of a legacy. From my apartment across the Charles, I watched the live feed in the shareholder portal. Silent frames of a conference room with frosted walls, executives filing in under the fluorescents. Ethan sat at the head, sleeves rolled, expression unreadable. A single brass plaque had been installed in front of him. Caldwell Capital. Partner. New metal glinting among old oak. Jason arrived late, jaw tight, sleeves perfect. I could tell by the angle of his gait that he hadn't slept. Evelyn followed, pearls straight, smile rigid, the public face of calm the family paid so much to maintain. She took the seat beside Ethan as if proximity alone might keep things contained. The first order of business was routine, or should have been. Ethan requested historical ledgers, operational budgets, hiring justifications, R&D expenditures. The hospital's controller slid packets across polished wood, but Ethan's team declined the paper. They wanted server access, raw exports, timestamps. Digital fingerprints don't bend as easily as ink. Jason leaned forward, voice low. The feed had no audio, but I knew that look. A rehearsed blend of charm and irritation he'd perfected over years of escaping real accountability. His hand motioned to delay, to stall for proper preparation. Ethan merely nodded to the IT liaison posted by the door. A secure laptop was handed over, credentials already applied. The liaison's badge carried an unfamiliar vendor logo, someone Ethan trusted more than any Hartley insider. At 10:14 a.m., my phone buzzed with an encrypted ping. Kelly. I opened the message to find a single file link and the words, "For when you need it." I downloaded the clip and pressed play. The recording was grainy but clear enough. Jason's voice first, brittle with bravado. We phase her out gently. Sabbatical, then reorg. By Q4, she's a ghost. Evelyn answered, each syllable clipped. Do it quietly. Shareholders hate noise. A year ago, they'd plotted my erasure in that very conference room. Now the room was turning on them. I forwarded the audio to Amelia with no commentary. 3 minutes later, she replied, circulating to Caldwell Compliance. Stand by. I could almost feel the temperature drop on the top floor as inboxes chimed. Back on the live feed, Jason's shoulders stiffened. Evelyn whispered something sharp. Ethan listened, then slid a single page across to them. Even at low resolution, the red numbers leapt out, negative balances bracketed by parentheses. 4,300,000. Funds allocated to Hartley Future Labs, the robotic surgery venture Jason had sold to the board as the next frontier. The vendor row was blank. No address, no tax ID, just a shell abbreviation and a payment schedule stretching 18 months. Jason reached for an explanation, but Ethan lifted a hand. Small, final. The meeting recessed. Directors filed out in uneasy 2s and 3s. Ethan's auditors stayed, plugging cold drives into ceiling-mounted ports, carbon copying every byte before the network team could blink. While the hospital scrambled, Boston carried on outside my windows. Ferries cutting gray water, sirens weaving through traffic, lives saved by people who still had badges that worked. I brewed coffee. Steady hands at last. At noon, Kelly texted again. The cafeteria buzzed with half-heard phrases. New owner, forensic audit, embezzlement. She ended with, people are finally asking where you are. I typed a thank you, but didn't send it. Some silences were worth preserving. By mid-afternoon, Amelia confirmed the audio and ledger scan had been logged as supporting evidence. Ethan's counsel had already launched a formal inquiry into executive misrepresentation. The document I'd signed in Cambridge was doing its quiet work. No fireworks, no headlines yet. Only the slow tightening of well-made screws. My phone rang. Jason. I let it vibrate. Once, twice, then answered on speaker, letting the room hear his breath. They're going back 3 years. Claire, if they keep digging, Mom's involved too. You have to stop this. No, I said, voice even, watching snow start to tap the window pane. You already did. They called 19 times the day the audit became public. I answered none. The burner phone lay face down on the windowsill, its screen pulsing silently until the battery surrendered. Outside, the Atlantic rolled against a raw December sky, gulls circling a lone trawler like punctuation marks in the cold. My new house smelled of cedar and sea salt, bare walls echoing every breath. No portraits, no awards, no framed diplomas, nothing a future visitor could point to and ask, what happened back then? An encrypted email from Amelia slid across the laptop. Final audit report attached. I opened it once. Jason, Suspended pending investigation into fraudulent disbursements. Evelyn. Board inquiry scheduled, counsel retained at personal expense. The hospital had issued a press statement rich in passive voice. Irregularities were discovered. Leadership transitions forthcoming. A legacy imploding in slow motion, exactly the way it had been built. I moved the file into a new folder labeled Closed and set a 30-day timer to erase it entirely. Data is still data until you give it meaning. I was done giving it meaning. The mailbox down the gravel drive held one envelope, thick, hand-addressed. No return name, just the hospital's street etched in ink so faint it looked tentative. I slid it open with the edge of a seashell. Inside, a single sheet of stationery, the crest faded with age. You did what I couldn't. The signature was 3 looping letters, RH, barely steady, as though written in a hotel room far from anyone who might see. My father had spoken through silence his entire life. This was the first time the silence sounded like gratitude. I folded the page along the original crease and slid it into the back of a drawer beside the ledger he'd once kept hidden. The documents touched like 2 magnets finally allowed to meet, and the drawer closed with a soft wooden sigh. A kettle began to sing. I poured the water over leaves that unfurled like small gray wings, steam clouding the window. My phone, my real phone, was still powered off, the SIM removed. I couldn't remember the last time that had been true. The folder on my desktop labeled Exit Claire blinked under the cursor. I highlighted every subdirectory, years of spreadsheets, voice memos, annotated bylaws, and compressed them into a single archive. Dragged the archive onto an external drive, then ejected it. The drive clicked into the fireproof lockbox with the ledger and the letter, a quiet trinity of endings. The lid closed. The key turned once. I should have felt triumphant, but the emotion that settled was simpler. Space. Like finishing a long surgery and realizing the hum in your head was only the lights, not your pulse. A good surgeon knows when not to cut. My father used to say during the rare evenings he let himself sit at the kitchen table, hands wrapped around tea instead of scalpels. For years I misunderstood him, thinking restraint was another form of surrender. Tonight, the lesson tasted clear. Night pressed in, vast and soundless. No headlines reached this coast yet, only the low hush of the tide rearranging stones no one would catalog. I carried my mug to the deck, wool socks sliding against the planks. Salt coated my lips. Lights from the harbor flickered like distant nodes on a heart monitor. Steady, indifferent. Somewhere behind me, the house router blinked green. Messages queuing, reporters refreshing, lawyers drafting rebuttals. I let them collect dust in the ether. Let them ask their questions to empty seats. Wind lifted my hair, the air sharp as antiseptic. I exhaled, the steam of the tea mingling with my breath until both vanished. They said I was out. I said, understood. That was enough. You are no longer the director of surgery. That was it. No greeting, no apology. Just a flat, dispassionate voicemail that cut deeper than any scalpel ever could. Claire Hartley stood in her kitchen, the light from the fridge spilling onto the tile floor, casting her in a half-glow. The coffee she'd poured earlier had gone cold. She hadn't moved in the 23 minutes since the message played. Not even to breathe properly. She pressed play again. The voice was precise, familiar. Her mother's. Evelyn Hartley had always been the embodiment of order, and now, the instrument of erasure. There were no emails, no board announcement. Her hospital inbox simply blinked an error. Her password expired, her access revoked. Claire opened the hospital intranet on her personal laptop. It greeted her as if she'd never worked there. She didn't cry, but her eyes stung in that dry, sterile way betrayal tends to sting. Monday morning, she walked through the Hartley General Hospital lobby as she had for 14 years. This time the badge clicked red. That's weird, the guard mumbled, avoiding her gaze. System glitch, maybe. Claire didn't argue. She simply smiled without her teeth. Upstairs, her photo was missing from the honor wall. The glass was smudged where it had been removed. Her name no longer appeared on the digital staff directory. She tried the office door. Locked. Someone had already changed the key code. Claire stood there, still, a ghost in a place she once ruled. She called Evelyn. Voicemail. She called Richard. His secretary picked up. Said he was unavailable. No one explained. No one denied. They just let the silence do the severing. Back at home, she retrieved the hard drive she hadn't touched in 3 years. Inside was the paper trail of the $800,000 personal loan she had extended to the hospital during the 2020 collapse. The very money that saved operations. Receipts, board memos, transfer logs. Yet no one had acknowledged it. No reimbursement. No thank you. Not even a footnote in the financial report. She scrolled through old calendar entries. Countless meetings held without her. Her name omitted from reports she had authored. Photos from press events where she had been cropped out. It wasn't a sudden betrayal. It was a careful, meticulous fade-out. The same surgical precision she had taught them, now weaponized against her. At the town hall that week, Jason took the stage in a designer blazer, hands raised in faux humility. "We're ushering in a new chapter at Hartley," he said, "and Claire is taking some well-deserved personal time." The room applauded. Claire stood in the back, half-shadowed by the projection light. Not one person turned. Not even the ones who owed her their credentials, their surgeries, their survival. Except one. Kelly approached her after the meeting, eyes darting like someone about to commit a small crime. "Are you okay?" she whispered. Just 3 words, but the only ones that felt real all week. Claire nodded once, though she wasn't sure what she was agreeing to. That night, she created a folder on her desktop. Exit Claire. Inside, she began to drop everything. The loan documents, audit flags, budget inconsistencies, whispered accusations, and silent records. Not as an act of rage, but as documentation, a case file, the way any surgeon would prep for the unknown, thoroughly, methodically, without panic. Claire didn't want justice handed to her. She wanted truth to surface on its own, and drag everything else with it. The voices were clear. "She's too principled," Evelyn said, sharp but calm, like a diagnosis. "That makes her dangerous," Jason added. Then silence, and then faint laughter. Claire sat still, one earbud in, one hand hovering above the pause button. The file had no label, no timestamp, just an anonymous upload to her encrypted inbox. But the voices were theirs, not spliced, not edited, not deniable. The audio wasn't criminal, but it didn't need to be. It was the truth, unfiltered, spoken behind her back. And now, in her hands. She forwarded the file to Amelia Jo with a short message. "It's time." Amelia replied in less than 2 minutes. "This is leverage, not revenge." 3 hours later, Claire entered a low-lit restaurant tucked between 2 shuttered art galleries in Cambridge. It didn't have a sign, just a heavy brass handle and a maitre d' who said nothing when she gave her name. At the corner booth, Ethan Caldwell. Dark suit, no tie, fingers interlocked. Amelia slid a thick envelope across the table. "This," she said, "confirms transfer of your 38% equity to Caldwell Capital, effective immediately." Claire didn't flinch. She didn't even read it twice. She picked up the pen and signed with the same care she'd used in surgery. Deliberate, exact. Ethan leaned forward. "We begin Monday. Quiet diligence, then precise escalation." He smiled without warmth. Claire returned it. She didn't need warmth. She needed results. 2 days later, at the board meeting, Ethan arrived with a quiet entourage and a USB stick. He didn't request reports or summaries. He requested full server access, data that couldn't be rewritten or scrubbed. Jason blinked too fast. Evelyn folded her hands in front of her like a judge watching a courtroom shift against her. Back at home, Claire received another message from Kelly, a short clip this time. Evelyn's voice again, laughing softly. Q4, she's going to be a ghost. Claire forwarded it to Amelia. One line in the subject. Use it. Then came the numbers. At the next board session, Ethan stood and presented the audit. $4.3 million wired to Hartley Future Labs, a name that appeared in Jason's keynote but not in any corporate filings. The address was a co-working space. The tax ID? Expired. The vendor? Non-existent. The room was quiet. Jason didn't speak. He stared at the floor. Evelyn didn't interrupt. She never did when her hands weren't clean. That night, Claire's phone rang. Jason's voice cracked as he said, "They're going to keep digging. If this goes further, Mom gets implicated. You have to stop." Claire didn't hesitate. "You guys already did it." She hung up. Then she opened the small fireproof box beneath her desk. Inside, a leather-bound drive labeled Exit Claire. Next to it, her father's letter, the ink slightly smudged. "You did what I couldn't." She placed them side by side, closed the lid. Outside, the sea wind howled. Claire stepped onto the porch, wrapped in a quiet sweater, watching the horizon darken into blue. The air was sharp, honest. No more titles, no press releases, just silence. And the truth, standing still. Even in silence, the truth made its way through. Claire never raised her voice, never called a press conference, never demanded justice through noise. But in the end, the empire that once erased her had to answer for every quiet decision it made. No titles were reclaimed, no apology ever came, yet what was broken could no longer pretend to be whole. Sometimes the most irreversible revolutions begin not with protest, but with precision. The lesson is clear. Injustice doesn't always wear horns. It often wears a smile and a seat at the boardroom table. When those in power rewrite the narrative, it takes quiet courage and relentless clarity to restore the facts. Claire's story wasn't about revenge. It was about refusing to vanish, about letting the truth do what power could not. Like a surgeon's final stitch after a long operation, justice doesn't have to be loud. It just needs to hold. And when it does, even the ones who walked away will feel the weight of what they tried to bury. No wall of lies can stand forever against the tide of truth. Perhaps that's the quiet warning left behind. Stay silent long enough and you'll find yourself complicit. But speak, even if only through action, and the system begins to shake. If this story resonates with you, if you've ever been pushed aside, silenced or underestimated, let Claire's journey remind you, you don't need to shout to win. You just need to know where to cut and when to walk away. Like this story, if you felt the quiet power behind Claire's fight. Comment 1 if you've ever stood alone and still chose to rise. Don't forget to subscribe and share this with someone who needs to be reminded. Truth always finds its voice.